Excuse me. Just have to wipe the tears away from my eyes. Whew. That one was surprisingly emotional. I did not expect a movie about World War One to be so emotional, but then again, it kind of makes sense considering that it's about war. But I guess just based off of the trailers and based off the general premise, I just thought that this movie was going to be about two guys who were deep into enemy lines and just had to deliver a message, and it was going to be really thrilling, kind of like Mad Max Fury Road, where there is characters and there is a bit of character development, but it's mostly just about the action. But wow, Sam Mendes really knows how to write some emotion in his movies. And I think it also helps that this is one shot. The movie is at least cheated to look like one shot, kind of like Birdman. It isn't literally one shot because I think there's only actually been one movie that's ever done that. It's some random French film. I'm going to fact check myself on that one. And for those of you that don't know, one shot just means that the camera turns on and it's just one take. The whole thing is like a stage play. Even in stage plays, the curtains close and there's intermission and stuff. But it's kind of like a stage play in the sense that there are no cuts. It's just one shot. It's an incredibly ambitious thing for any director to undertake. Birdman was probably the first one to do it in an extremely compelling way, in a very engaging and interesting way. But for them to, for the powers that be, and I guess it was Sam Mendes' idea, to try to do it for a war film, that is incredible. That is an incredibly ambitious idea. Because not only are you dealing with actors who have to remember all their lines and you're dealing with camera work and how you're going to get the camera over here and what have you, but you're also dealing with violence and explosions and gunshots and blood and all that stuff. And to cheat that, to make it look real, is very, very difficult. And granted, there was at least one scene that was quite obviously CGI, and it did kind of pull me out of the film a little bit. But it's a very minor complaint in light of how incredible this film is and how just the sheer amount of achievement of this movie. Kind of like Birdman, there are some scenes that are pretty obvious when they cut. And that also kind of pulled me out of the film. But actually, I would say that in Birdman, the cuts are even more obvious than in 1917. So there's that. This movie is full of a lot of A-list talent, particularly Colin Firth and Benedict Cumberbatch, but they actually have very minor roles. The two main leads, whose names I don't know off the top of my head at least, obviously got the bulk of the screen time, being the leads. And I actually kind of like that. I like the fact that there were, not no-name actors, but they were kind of actors that I had never... I feel like they were those actors where you've seen them before, like you've seen them in certain movies, but you just don't exactly know where. You don't know exactly where their faces are. And I'm glad that they decided to use relatively unknown actors for the main roles because it didn't pull me out of the film. When Colin Firth was on screen, my first thought was, "Oh, look, Colin Firth, an excellent, excellent actor." And then when Benedict Cumberbatch comes in the film, granted it's much later, and so I was so invested that I could barely register there was Benedict Cumberbatch, but at the same time, there was a little part of my brain. It's like, oh, look, Doctor Strange. Nice. In 1917. This movie definitely didn't have as much violence as I thought there was going to be. The movie focused almost exclusively on the relationship between these two characters, and even more so than that, it focused on just the emotion and the raw challenges of getting through war. When you're sent off on a straightforward but very difficult mission of go behind enemy lines and tell this battalion to not advance because they're walking into a trap, you're going to run into a lot of unexpected things, which the movie clearly knew. It seemed like every beat of the movie was something unexpected that the characters did not expect to run into, which makes sense because, the British didn't know what was in front of them. Now, granted, the premise itself does seem a little silly, and I don't really know much at all about war, so correct me if this is normal, but to send two people behind enemy lines to deliver a message with a few weapons just seems a bit reckless, I guess. And to the movie's credit, they did address it. You know, they did say, like, just the two of us, really? And then Colin Firth's character spouts some kind of poem, I guess is meant to motivate them to go. And they do struggle throughout the film, you know, just the two of us, like, can we really do this? And, you know, I like how in the beginning they sort of had these contrasting characters, kind of like a Woody and Buzz Lightyear. Now, that analogy only works to the extent that at the beginning, Woody and Buzz Lightyear are completely different, okay? That's all that, there's no other extension. There's no other attachment of that analogy to 1917. So when these two characters start off, they're completely opposite from one another. One is extremely invested and motivated to complete this mission, and the other is much more apprehensive. He's much more fearful. But the way that both these characters go through certain arcs is very compelling and a lot of fun to watch. I don't know if the marketing campaign of this film necessarily drove home the point that it's one shot, but just be well aware of that when you're going in, because it makes certain scenes far more compelling and far more engaging. We're so conditioned as an audience, especially me, when we're sitting there to be watching a film and just expecting a cut at the end of some kind of emotional scene. But if you go in there knowing that there isn't going to be any cuts, that you're going to have to stay with these characters no matter what they're going through, it makes it so much more dramatic. There are some scenes that would leave anyone traumatized if they were in the place of the characters. And we're used to watching films where at the end of a horrible, horrible moment, you just cut away to something else. But that's not real life. And I like how Alejandro Inarritu, the director of Birdman and The Revenant, kind of touched on this when he was explaining his reasoning behind the fact that Birdman is one shot. He said, when you wake up in the morning, our entire life is one tracking shot. You know, you can't cut to, you know, work, or you can't cut to school, or you can't cut out of some awkward situation. You have to sit there. You have to be there. And in a similar case with 1917, these characters go through some horrible tragedy, but you just have to stay there with them. You have to stay there with their trauma, with their frustration, and with their drama, and you have to live with it. And that's what made the movie so compelling to watch. That's what made it so tense, especially the first 30 minutes. The first 30 minutes of this movie, I'm pretty sure my hands were just like this white knuckle grip on the seat, and I was just sort of receding back into my chair, hoping that nothing bad would happen to them. It really was fun to watch. I can't imagine how long it must have taken Sam Mendes and crew to set up this kind of cinematography, because the look of the film is so real and so raw. There are like corpses everywhere, not just of human beings but of animals. And I'm sure that some of it was CGI, but if it was CGI, it was pretty darn convincing. The acting is absolutely superb. And I'm sure that a lot of actors enjoy the fact that they have to deal with like 20 or 30 minute takes, because they're able to build up their emotion, and they're able to get really invested into a film. I don't know anything offhand about this. I don't have any personal experience with acting, but I've heard that for actors, it's nice whenever they can stay within a scene for a while, and they don't have to worry about all these cuts and all these edits, because once the camera cuts, they have to build their emotion back up, and they have to get back into the scene, which I'm sure can be pretty difficult, and which is why we probably have method actors who refuse to break character, because they want to maintain that consistent level of emotion throughout the movie. So I'm sure that one of the reasons why we got such great performances out of 1917 is the fact that the camera just doesn't cut, and they're able to really get invested into whatever scene that they're doing. 1917 is not only an adrenaline-packed thrill ride, but it's also an emotionally packed thrill ride. So be sure that you bring some tissues. And I'm going to give this one a solid 9.0 out of 10. So what are your thoughts about this sort of one-shot style of a movie? Do you like it? Do you not like it? Do you wish there were more edits, more editing to make it more exciting or compelling? Or do you like the fact that directors take their time to make sure that this one tracking shot is as awesome as it can be? Whatever your thoughts are, let me know down in the comments below. Thank you so much, everybody, for watching. I truly appreciate it, and I'll see you on the next cinematic adventure.